for another episode of the NABC podcast with Dr. Malik Rahim, the President Conversations. And today I have one of my dear friends. He's like a younger brother to me. I can't say little brother because when you see this brother, you think he's, you know, you think there's a new movie coming out, and I think they miscast it. They put The Rock in there for Black Adam. They should have put this brother in there because once you see him, you understand what I mean. If he wasn't going to be a mental health counselor, he should have been a personal trainer. But that's a whole different story in another lifetime. But this brother, I'm really going to know that you all are going to enjoy this conversation. It's going to touch on a little bit about black masculinity. It's going to touch on microaggressions. It's going to talk on struggles of growing up as a black male, and even going to touch in on deciding to become your own boss. So Andre, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Well, let's see, what about myself? Well, I am a mental health clinician. I've been working in this field now for I guess 6 to 7 years now. I've been working private practice for 5 years. But before that, I think my first dipping my toe into the mental health field, I was working in the treatment courts. And I just couldn't connect working in the treatment courts.
Okay.
So I later found my way to private practice where I found like this was my niche in this sector, is working with individuals.
Awesome.
But I'm also a doctoral student, which I need to get on top of minds immediately. And I'm a big advocate for the vitiligo community. Vitiligo is a condition where your immune system attacks itself. It starts killing your melanocytes.
Okay.
And what ends up happening is you're left with the skin that's underneath your pigment, which is usually white, milky white. And so it starts looking like patches. And sometimes people who have vitiligo, they have a hard time adjusting to losing their pigment. So they go through a loss of identity. And me, myself, I'm a big advocate about self-acceptance and self-love, because there's no cure for vitiligo, and there's treatment, but there's no cure. So even with treatment, sometimes the treatment doesn't always work successfully, or it helps exacerbates the spread of vitiligo. So then someone who's going to seek treatment, they might be left emotionally distraught once they start seeing the loss of more pigment. So I kind of work within the community, help individuals as far as accepting, spreading words of body positivity and self-love.
Awesome. I'm glad you brought that up. And then you kind of talked on, as you were speaking, I know it's against proper therapist protocol, but I was thinking of my next question. And my next question was going to be, can you tell us a little bit about some of the stuff that you do for the vitiligo community? But you kind of touched on that. But if you want to get into more detail, that'd be great. But when you're working with individuals who have vitiligo, what if, let me rephrase that. If, let's say, for example, if you were consulting right now your fellow therapists in the NABC on working with individuals, they have a client that has vitiligo, what would you tell them that they should, concentrate on, focus on, and really, push forward as far as like trying to help them, fortify their identity, not feel like an imposter, not having these different type of self-hatred and different avenues of who am I, how do I fit in, feeling less than. How would you tell us how best for us if it could be just a one size fit all? I know it can't, but if you could just summarize it, what would you talk to us about?
Well, from my experience of working with individuals who have vitiligo, depending on where they're at with their identity, because I think about the 5 stages of grief and loss, where there's, a little bit of denial and confusion. And then there may be some type of bargaining where, people are bargaining, God, please, because I went through this, like, please just bring me my skin back, whatever you want me to do, I'll be good, I'll do what's right. And then, there's sadness, there's anger, and then hopefully people will get to the stage of acceptance. And depending on the individuals, they may go through only 2 or 3 stages. They may go through all of them. I know from my experience, as far as talking with other individuals who have vitiligo, they generally go through these 5 stages. Right. So, right. Depending on where they're at, and if they come in with a sense of loss of identity, I challenge them. I'll talk to them, find out their background, find out like who they were before vitiligo. And I'll ask them, like, what was a place where you felt confident? And depending on the individual, if they had vitiligo from a very childhood and that's all they knew, that's a different story. But a lot of people who have vitiligo, they develop their vitiligo into their teens or even 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And so, depending on where that individual is at, I challenge them to either look back at who they were or who they were before. And we'll talk about how to see about getting back to that space where they felt confident, where they felt secure within themselves, or, or where they just felt happy in general. So once I find this out, then I start talking to them about who they are now. Right. And, I think sometimes also, I usually use the community as a resource. So I'll go to like Instagram, I'll pull up a whole bunch of pictures with people with vitiligo, because there's a lot of people with vitiligo who embrace themselves now. Right. It wasn't like that years ago before, like Facebook and Instagram, where people just started doing modeling and getting out there and everything. So I would get all these pictures. I would ask them questions. I'd be like, hey, you see this person? And they're like, yeah. I said, what do you think of them? How do you think they look? How do what do you think they're promoting? And they're like, man, they're embracing themselves. They like love themselves. They're beautiful. I'll ask them about the patterns. Tell me what the patterns, what do you see? Like, man, I see a heart and different things like that. Or, just their style, their patterns are really beautiful. And I'll go through picture after picture. Like maybe I might do like about 6 pictures. Then I would go ahead and confront them, do a gentle confrontation. I would be like, so if you see all, because like times 99 at a time, someone's like, man, that person.
We froze.
So I try to get them to a space where they acknowledge that they see someone beautiful in those pictures. And then I turn it back to them. I was like, okay, if you see there's beauty in them, how come you can't see beauty within yourself? And that's when usually the wheels get to turning. And they'll start saying, well, I don't look like them. I'm like, yeah, none of those people look like each other. And that's the beautiful thing. They're all characteristically unique. So I look at it from a very positive psychology aspect of what someone sees and how different is beautiful. Then I always challenge the social construct of beauty, and when I do that, it usually puts the wheels in motion. I remember one man, he was feeling very suicidal, and I started talking to him. I started doing everything I just said. And within like 3 months, he started posting very positive, he would post like here and there pictures of himself just to see what people would say. And he always got positive responses. And this guy was very handsome, you know, dark skin. He was like he's Haitian, and you know, he's just a really good-hearted gentleman, really good sense of humor and everything. And I told him, I was like, hey, why don't you show up to the World Vitiligo Day conference, and I'll meet you there, because we have a conference. And I always tell everybody, you need to go at least one time. You know, that way you can decide if it's something for you or something not for you. But from what I see, there's an energy there where there's so many people who experience the same things in life, you know, and there's other people there who are at a place of self-acceptance and love. And it promotes this positive energy where people will leave the conference feeling even positive, feeling more confident about themselves. Like after we went to this vitiligo conference, this man started posting pictures, and my God, like he started posting pictures left and right. And like I at one time I used to post a lot of pictures because people wouldn't post pictures of themselves, but this guy, he took over, and like he was the man. Like women were commenting, and you know, all of a sudden his confidence went up through the roof. And you know, it's so funny because I was talking to him the other day, and he was like, man, Andre, what you did for me, you did a lot for me. I was like, I did nothing. You did that for yourself, because you were willing to look inward. You were looking to look at yourself, and that, you know, that self-construct you had, you know, you reconstructed it. And so now you're, you know, you're still the same individual, but you have new eyes of how you look, and how you, and the impact you make on the world. So, you know, I saw that as such a beautiful thing. You know, you know, when I have a chance to connect with individuals on that level, you know, it really motivates me. It, you know, it drives my passion for this community, because I know it's a community that not everyone thinks about. They may see people, they may see like a model like Winnie Harlow, and they be like, oh, she's beautiful and everything, but they don't know there's layers there of how people feel about themselves.
Right. I like how you said you challenge the standard of beauty, especially with that individual. Because it's like beauty runs on a spectrum, and we've been taught for so long, you know, this, what is beautiful is a European standard, right? And the more of them European standards you have, the more beautiful you are. And even in our community, with colorism and all this, it's like we even had like revolutions of black is beautiful. And then when you have someone with vitiligo, you have them, you know, like, am I really beautiful, right? And they're challenging, you know what I'm saying? By challenging that beauty, and even challenging, you know, what actually makes you black, you know, is very, very powerful. And I love the work that you've been doing. I've been seeing your posts on your Instagrams, and I'm like, you know, I mean, you know, brothers and sisters, if you want to see a model, you know, you need to check out Mr. Andre's Instagram page. It's like he has a beautiful spirit. It shines through in the picture. So you really need to. And the work he's been doing in the vitiligo community is just huge, because you're somewhat of a celebrity now in the community. You know, I've been, you know, checking out some of the posts, and I'm seeing that you're giving a lot of the young people encouragement just by your presence of being able to step out front. And speaking of stepping out front, you were saying in your biography, your brief biography you gave us, you know, not only being a mental health counselor for over 6 years, but also being a doctoral student, you decided to open up your own private practice. What led to that decision?
Well, it was something that struck me. I remember like one of the jobs I had when I left the treatment courts, and I was working around a very supportive, BIPOC infused mental health community practice. And so like anytime something came up, we would talk about it. We would sit down and be like, man, how did that affect you and everything like that. And it felt like such a safe and amazing space.
Right.
After I left there and I went a little further west, I've worked for like maybe 3 private practices. And what I found, this is what I feel like when things go on in the news, especially when it involves, like for me, black men
Right.
being shot by the police, being found hung and everything like that. You know, there's no acknowledgement in the practice. People go about their day. They're happy when you're coming in and you're making money, but they don't really check on you when things happen. Or maybe there's just a lack of awareness. And I definitely say it's white privilege because,
Right.
you know, when you're white, these things don't really affect you. When you're a black man and you see these things, you know, me, myself, you know, I have a lot of anxiety. When I see the police driving around or they're behind me, my heart starts beating and everything. Even though I'm not doing anything, there's this fear that I can be one of the statistics when I get pulled over because like I might be, you know, to who knows, to that policeman or whatever, I might seem like a threat, aggressive or whatever. And, you know, going into white spaces where there's majority of white clinicians, you know, of my whole time working in private practice, I've only had one clinician out of like, I would say out of like at least about 80 clinicians I've worked around that have ever stopped to ask me, man, Dre, are you okay? Like, how are you doing?
Right.
You know, how are you doing with everything that's been going on? Like he was like, you know, I seen on the news, it's been all these different shootings with black men and everything. How are you doing? And that struck me as something like, wow, I needed that. I needed that. And for me, this was just another clinician. The owners of these private practices, they don't acknowledge these things. They don't give you a space to sit. They don't give you a space to talk or, you know, even check on you or anything. All they care about is you coming in and making money. And yeah, they're very nice. They'll have a nice, very welcoming environment and everything like that. But that's not enough.
Right.
That's not enough, especially like we're supposed to be in this field where we care, it's very humanistic and we care about the people. And the people that come in, we're promoted, like, you know, take care of them, sit with them, but there's a lack of connection with the mental health clinicians, therapists, counselors. They don't really give that space to care about us. And for me, I was in a space where like, you know what, I have my LCPC, I should be opening my own practice so I don't have to feel nervous or anxious when I come in here. I don't have to feel disconnected from everyone who's having a grand old time at life because, you know, they're people of whiteness or they're not black and they're not experiencing all these different emotions when we see things in the news. And it's not like it's once in a while. It's week after week. Sometimes it's multiple times a week. And not to give a space to a clinician who is working for your practice or even acknowledge these pains and these hurts that is going on throughout the world, to not acknowledge that, I think that's doing a disservice to the people that's working under you. So my thought is I wanted to give my own space to clinicians, especially BIPOC clinicians, or, you know, even clinicians of whiteness who struggle with, you know, talking about these things or struggle with like, you know, not knowing what to do, because even acknowledging that there's injustices going around the world, that's monumental. That can promote so much care and love and support amongst the people that you work with. And it'll give you a space to like, man, I need to come back here. I feel good working here and everything. So, you know, my thought is like, I want to be able to give that space to clinicians, and I want to do something different in this community that we have as far as clinicians and helping professionals. Give these spaces so we can talk about these things. Give these spaces so we can get these things off our chest. Whether, you know, I remember when I was at NIU, they had this beautiful thing called the elephant in the room, addressing the elephant in the room. And we talk about a lot of disparities of injustices. I remember, around the time like Philando Castile was murdered and everything like that, we gathered and we talked about it. And it was such a beautiful experience, especially, the given like space for BIPOC individuals to talk about how they're feeling and everything. And, acknowledging what can we do, or we feel powerless about what we can do. And we talk about, well, education is a way that we can change things. But, even in those spaces, you still feel like, especially it was only like once in a while, I need to have a space where I can do this like at least monthly and check in and everything like that. Not just about staffings or whatever, check in with everyone that's working with me, or even people from the community that experiences things.
Right. Wow, that's extremely powerful. It almost makes me wonder, do we really care about individuals if they're not really offering us anything like compensation? How much do we really care, and do we really turn our empathy on and off just when it's getting paid?
Oh, yes, that's something that definitely runs through my mind. And I'll tell you this here, when us as clinicians, like, we're connected with other clinicians and everything like that, I noticed when I post something, on Facebook, and it was like almost like a venting of frustration about what's going on in the world as far as with, Black people being murdered. I saw another clinician of whiteness post about, be careful of vicarious trauma and everything, about everything that's going on in the news and everything, and how it affects you, and you seek mental health, And I don't know if that was directed as a direct line of my post or whatever, but I see that even from that aspect, when Black men vent, when Black women vent, we're seen as either, like the angry Black person, the angry Black man, the angry Black woman, or they're a little bit crazy. Let's stay away from them. Let's not even address that topic. White clinicians go mute. They go quiet. But you post something very, positive, everything. Oh, you see everybody comment and everything. They're afraid. And it's so sad that we go through this training, we go through, all this education and everything we learn. The only way we can change the system is by acknowledging there is a system and really holding people accountable, really talking about what's going on. But there's silence.
Right. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing so much with us and giving us this a lot to think about in this conversation. If anyone wanted to reach out to you or contact you or follow you, how would they be able to?
Well, just depending on what they use, I am on Facebook, Andre NJ on Facebook, and on Instagram, I think I'm at Dre 777. So Vidi meaning vitiligo, and Dre, my nickname. So,
all right.
That's about it.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for all the knowledge and a lot of things to think about. And I hope and pray that your work, not only within the community as a whole, but specifically the vitiligo community, really thrives and create a lot of healing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you and the word of love and support.
Thank you. Now I have a quick question before we leave. Does vitiligo only impact people of African descent, Black people?
No, and actually it's 1% to 2% of the world's population. So we're looking at 8 billion people in the world right now. That's like 80 million to 160 million that's affected. And it doesn't matter if you're, you know, African descent or European descent or Asian descent, Middle Eastern, whatever, it affects 1% of the population. And there's been like a struggle within the community and everything, where some people feel they're not acknowledged for having vitiligo. I know
Really?
people who are more fair skinned or like white, people tell them like, I don't see your vitiligo, even though, if you really look closely, you might be able to see it. I remember I was at a conference and this one girl, she was Latina, and she was like, she was really pissed and upset that people would not acknowledge. And I was like, look, I don't know what they're on, but I see your vitiligo. Because like, no matter what, whether a person can say, oh, I see it very clearly, or, I see it very faintly, or I don't see it at all, you know what's going on with your body. So whether someone else acknowledges or doesn't acknowledge it, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
What matters is your perspective of it. So in your perspective, you see your pigment changing all over your body, and, it's very frustrating when other people won't acknowledge, like, oh yeah, I do see, your vitiligo, or I can understand, I'm sure you have struggles, because there's an internal struggle, because sometimes people notice when one little pinprick spot pops up. I know for me, my spots are constantly changing. So I notice these things. And other people may not notice, like, man, oh no, your vitiligo still looks the same. But no, I notice the different patterns and everything as it changes.
Right.
And sometimes in the community, there's this distinct on colorism where people kind of exclude people experiences having vitiligo. So, that's a whole nother part of the community that, I feel needs, focus on and looking at.
Right. Almost like my oppression is deeper than yours because my vitiligo is more seen than yours is.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. And, I think as far as a community of individuals who support each other, that can actually do damage, emotional damage to someone who's struggling with their vitiligo, feeling unseen, or even with, other people may have a chance to like notice and really pay attention, like what's going on when another individual of color doesn't see a big problem, because like, well, your tones kind of look the same and everything like that. I can't tell the difference.
Right.
That's really doing a disservice to that individual and validating their experiences and whatnot.
Exactly. This almost really messes with their identity. Like, I have no place to go. I'm shunned by this. I feel shunned by this community, and I feel shunned by the community I should feel welcomed by. What do I do? So it really messes with a person's mental health potentially.
Oh man, there's such a struggle there, especially when people feel like, man, this person should be able to understand what I'm going through. And then when you talk to them and they're like, well, I don't really see that you have a big issue because your pigment is kind of very similar. So, what you're talking about, I don't connect with it because I know I go through struggles, and I don't think you really go through the struggles I go through. You cannot, tell an individual, what their struggles are. You can't walk in another individual's shoes. All you can do is just listen and hear what they're saying. And you might be able to connect with that individual on some level if you listen.
Right. I think I was having a conversation on an other episode. We were talking about submission as far as in relationships. And one of the things I was saying is that as men, we get this concept of masculinity, of being so strong, that a lot of times when we got to get comfortable being able to listen and not having the feeling that we gotta solve the problem. Because a lot of time our significant other will bring us a problem, but all they want to be is heard. But we're too busy trying to, because we're trying to protect it, we're too busy trying to solve their problem and not actually listening to their problem, their issue, the concern that they have. And once we start learning to actually listening, we create that safe space so they could feel that they can submit. Because submission, for a person to submit to you, they got to feel safe that you're not going to take advantage of them, you're not going to do them harm. And if we're sitting there always trying to solve the problem, sometimes they just want to be heard.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I think fundamentally, we want validation, especially when we're going through like similar struggles and everything like that. And to not get that validation, you never know what impact that may cause, whether a person may like isolate themselves or shrink inwardly and disconnect from people. I say you have to listen exactly what this person's message is and respond in kind, have empathy, have compassion, for another person's experiences.
Exactly. Wow. Well, again, thank you, sir, for the deep conversation. And I look forward to sitting down and meeting with you again and maybe breaking some bread or something.
For sure. I look forward to that.